Sure. So, Gerard Manley Hopkins was born July 28th, 1844 in Stratford, Essex, which is in England. His dad was also a poet. He became, obviously, an English poet and a Jesuit priest. And, he was baptized. He grew up very Catholic, and faith was a very big part of his life. And this kind of goes along with, the theme of, just, religion to go against deism for this time period. He often praised God through his vivid use of imagery and nature, and obviously we see a lot of this, use of nature and vivid imagery throughout this poem. He was also called the most original poet of the Victorian age, and he died on June 8th, 1989. So this poem, Spring and Fall, is a meditative poem about a young girl whose name was Margaret, and she was one day she was kind of watching the leaves fall, and she felt kind of upset. She was kind of grieving it, and this grief for the autumn leaves falling was kind of a subconscious realization of her own aging and mortality. So at the time she thought that this feeling of grief was just about the leaves changing, but really it was a reflection of how her mortality is, but she just didn't really realize it yet. And the title, Spring into Fall, I like to think of it kind of four ways. There's two ways that obviously it's written, or one way it's written and then one way that's kind of symbolic. So spring into fall, the regular kind of, so you have the season spring and then it changes and goes into fall eventually. Or you could think about it as it's kind of a spring into fall, kind of a jump spring, just kind of symbolizing how time moves really fast, and then this overall kind of shows the jump from childhood to adulthood. So some key themes throughout this poem. The first one is loss. So obviously there's the loss of leaves, but this contrasts the loss of an ideal childhood, and it's just kind of showing how kids don't really realize what their mortality is. They don't fully understand it. They don't really reflect on it or think about it, but sometimes they do subconsciously, but they don't really know it yet. So the loss of leaves kind of shows how over time kids kind of lose this idyllic childhood. And then innocence, Margaret, who's the girl in the poem, she's just a child, but she grieves for the trees. This is kind of similar, however, the poem, suggests, sorrow shifts from kind of, a natural world, to, an understanding of one's mortality, as you age, as you get older, you, kind of start to realize this, because, it's something that you just, didn't really, realize or notice before. And then, also the experience, so over time, we grow to understand that our sadness for the world is actually a reflection of our own passing time. Like I said, you might not realize it at first, but over time, through experience, you live and you learn and you kind of realize your mortality, and you maybe think back and you're oh, that's what I was feeling that one time, but you just didn't know it then. So some poetic elements used throughout this poem. He used a sprung rhythm and meter